I'm Christine Dunbar from SpeechModification.com, and this is my Smart American Accent training. Welcome to our live question and answer class. In this class, each week we talk about a topic related to American accent, American English pronunciation, or intonation, and I take your questions. So do feel free to leave your questions in the chat at any time. Just type the question in and I'll check those out. In the beginning today, I want to talk about spelling in English, and specifically about vowel sounds versus vowel letters. And we're going to look at the letters A and O and talk about what sounds they typically make and some accent error patterns that might happen for you because of spelling. So of course, our accent comes from when we learn our first language. There is a sound system in that language, and we have vowel sounds, we have consonant sounds, and they come together to form words. We hear specifically based on our native language, and then when we learn our second, our third additional languages, that sound system we had from our first language acts as a filter. So when you're listening to English, if it's not your first language, you may be hearing it through the filter of your native language and not necessarily hearing vowel sounds the same way that a native speaker would. It also affects our pronunciation. So that is kind of in general what comes, why we have accents. And then we also have the fact that English spelling is different from many languages. We don't have one letter that represents each sound, and we don't spell the sounds the same way. So you can look at a word, in some words, letter A is going to say ah like cat, ah like pasta, like above. There's many different sounds that a letter has to represent. So it's inconsistent, our spelling. It's very challenging. One of the main biases that you may have when you're looking at English is that when you see letter A, you might tend to think of the ah sound. We do spell some words with ah. Letter A does say ah in some words, like in father or pasta. But this is not very common. In fact, it's much more common that the ah sound is spelled with letter O in English. And so when you see an A, your tendency might be to think ah. But instead, most of the time when you see a letter A in English, the vowel sound is the ah sound, like in last or after. Now these examples are tough because if you speak a different dialect of English, like British English or Indian English, these might tend to be a little bit more last, after. They have a different sound in British English. It looks kind of like a backwards A in the IPA, so like that, without so much tail. And we don't have that sound in American English. We don't have the after sound. So I'm going to just warn you that these words may, when you say them and hear them, sound a little more like an ah. And what you want to go for is the ah sound that we have in the words black, cat. Typically, if you've been pronouncing and listening to American English, you can say cat and black with that forward ah sound, not too much trouble. Then you want to try to apply that in other words like last and after, where you might have a tendency to think more of the ah sound. So thinking of A as ah is going to be your first tip from this class. Then, as I mentioned, thinking of letter O not as the O sound. Yes, we do have plenty of words where O says O, like no, or go, or show. So it can be sometimes the O sound, but more often than O, letter O is going to say the ah sound. So when you're looking at a word like not or problem, it might help you to actually visualize an A or an AH. Not. Because in your mind, when you think of the ah sound, you probably think of A or AH, ah. So if I'm thinking of problem with the ah written that way, that might help me avoid saying problem, for example. So many times when you're pronouncing words like not and problem, you're not going all the way to saying note, right? but you might say a little bit more like not, with rounding, O-like qualities rather than that open, unrounded ah sound. Not a problem. I use the phrase not hot for this sound. You can also think of a word like father or pasta that's spelled with A for this ah sound. Just know that often when you see the O in English, it's going to be this ah sound. Of course, O can also say other sounds, like it can say schwa, the sound, in words like some or sun. I do have specific videos talking about each letter, like letter O can say many different sounds, letter A can say many different sounds, how to know which sound it says, and then also videos for each sound. So starting with the ah sound, what are the different ways we spell it, what words it's in. You can check those out on our vowels playlist. Also, you can get even more in depth on sounds versus spelling in our Sounds of English course on speechmodification.com. It walks you through all of the sounds of English and helps you know what's the sound, what different ways is it spelled, what are the accent error patterns you may have on it, and how do you correct those. So check that out. All of our online courses are either free or available for under $2 on speechmodification.com. They're a great way to build a strong foundation to pronounce any word you like in American English. Okay, so that was our introduction for today, just talking a little bit about English spelling, sounds, and specifically about the ah sound, the ah sound, and letters O and A. Now I'm going to turn to your questions. Welcome, everyone. It's nice to see you here. Do feel free to leave your questions at any time throughout the chat, throughout the class, in the chat. And if you're watching this later on, not live, you can leave your questions in the comments. I'll get back to you with a video that answers your question or a comment back. So use this time for what you specifically would like to know about. Okay. We have a question about how people say, how are you, in real talk, casual speech. So there's, of course, different phrases we use besides how are you. How's it going? How you doing? What's happening? How are ya? How are you? I'm already thinking about how we reduce this one. So one thing I like to mention when it comes to talking about this phrase, how are you, is that there are a couple of different ways that we can use intonation here. So first off, if I'm the first person to ask this, if I'm just seeing you first thing in the morning or whenever it might be, and I talk first, I might say, how are you? With a little bit of a rise up. How are you? I fall off in the intonation. So when we think about questions, sometimes we think we have to rise up at the end. That's only true if I'm saying a yes-no question. For example, if I'm saying, are you okay? Then I'm going to rise up on the stressed syllable of the stressed word. Are you okay? Because it's a yes-no question, meaning there's no question word. It has an inverted sentence order, so verb and then preposition or noun, pronoun or noun, so that if I can answer the question with yes or no, then I need to rise up. If I have a who, what, when, where, a question word at the start, I follow the same intonation pattern as with the statement. I just drop off. How are you? And in this case, if I'm the first person to talk, I'm introducing the topic of how we are. So are is important. It's the verb. How are you? Versus if I'm the second person to talk, I'm not going to repeat back. I'm fine. How are you? You can hear how that sounds a little weird, right? I would then say, how are you? With my rise and fall all happening on that last word and the you being held longer. I can also do that if I'm the first to talk. How are you? But I can't do how are you if I'm the second person to talk. So that isn't specifically what you asked about, but it was a good opportunity for me to share that little piece of intonation knowledge. It's useful to think about and listen for. You probably already naturally do it if you speak American English and are talking with people on a regular basis, but it's one thing that you can listen for. And the reason we do that is that we don't stress repeated information. So if the first person establishes the topic, we're talking about how we are, then the second person's job is to stress the new information, which is, we talked about me, now we're talking about you. We're not changing that we're talking about how we are. We're changing the subject that we're talking about. Okay. So when I say, how are you? How are you? I'm using a full correct phrase. I am linking how are you? So I'm kind of smooth between those. How are you? Or how are you? One reduction that we typically do in English is that R can become So if I'm stressing on R, how are you? I can't reduce that R. It's got the stress symbol, it's the stressed word in the phrase, and so it needs its clear vowel. But if I'm using the how are you version, it's going to sound kind of like, how are you? So my R is going to become an How are you? If I'm using the how are you version, I can say it as how are ya? How are ya? That's a little bit, it is something that you hear, how are ya? Where you often gets reduced to ya if it's unstressed. It's more likely you're going to hear that if you're saying, for example, how are you doing? How are you doing? Where the you isn't the end of the word, end of the phrase. It's kind of in this case it would become how are you? How are you doing? Because doing is stressed. So it's important to understand and know what's being stressed because that dictates where we do and don't reduce. So R can become and you can become ya as long as neither one of them is stressed. Then of course we also will say how's it going? How are you doing? Doing can become doin in casual speech. You just don't really use that professionally because it's reserved for more like talking among friends. So I wouldn't say to my boss in an interview in a more formal situation, how are you doing? I would say, how are you doing? Okay, you can get more help for Real Talk, this phrase, other phrases on our Real Talk playlist and in our Real Talk course on speechmodification.com. That's where we focus on the difference between the written words and spoken language, how we reduce sounds, and how we connect. So thank you for this question. It gave me an opportunity to talk about some really useful information, and I hope that I answered your question. And if I didn't, please feel free to follow up with a second question, clarifying if I didn't if I didn't give you what you were looking for with that question. Great question. Thank you so much. Okay. Good morning. Welcome, Eddie. Nice to see you. He's asking about the differences between the w sound like with and the oo sound like lose. And he also wants to know the words woo, woe, wound, and twilight. Okay, so woo, woe, wound, and twilight. Wound, or this could also be wound. It's two words, right? A wound like an injury, or wound like I wound the clock. So the difference between the w and the oo is that oo is just a clear vowel. So I don't make any change when I'm making that. I just move into the tight, rounded position. Ooh, back of the tongue lifted, resonance happens in the back. Versus the w it's a consonant sound, but it can be called a semivowel or a glide. That's because it typically moves between the oo vowel and the schwa vowel. So it's a quick glide between oo and wa. And so you have to have that movement when you're saying the sound. And for many people, twilight, for many people, when the W is followed by a rounded sound, they have a challenge putting those together. So I see why you would have asked about woo, woe, and wound, for example, or wound, because I'm moving from a rounded shape back into that oo or other rounded shape. So let's talk about twilight first, because in twilight it's not a rounded sound. We have the I diphthong and first syllable stress. So you can think about that. I would build that from just the Y. So it's actually just like the letter Y or the question word Y, and then Y, twilight. I'll write light that way just for variety, twilight. So Y, I'm just moving from that quick glide into my I, Y. When it comes to something like woo, you can see my lips if I go really slowly, woo, that they open a little and close a little because the is unrounded. So the second part of the glide here, I lose the rounding. And then when I'm going back to another sound, I have to re-round. So if I say woo, you should see the movement of the lips versus just ooh. If I was saying it without the W sound, ooh, I would just have a static lips with that ooh shape. So woo. And then when it comes to whoa, same thing. I'm moving from the ooh through the to the o. So whoa is like a long series of vowels. You're going to see it in the dictionary like this, moving to my diphthong O, which closes the jaw and becomes a little more lax. Woo is just my w semivowel and my oo. And then wound, again, the same as beginning as woo and then just adding my ND. Or if you're talking about wound, like I wound the clock, we have the ow diphthong. So there I go unrounded for the ah part of the ow, and then I'm rounding again, wound. Yeah, so either wound, that's the one, an injury, I have a wound on my leg, or wound, he's really wound up, I wound the clock. That one, I would write it more like ow, wow, and wound. So hopefully that's not too small for you to see. This is a great question, a great topic in general, and that w sound, you can get more help for that in my video for that. And Eddie, I know you're a channel member, and there's more help for that in the online courses that you have access to as a channel member. Thank you so much for that question. Okay, we have a question about the same with love. Yes, so back to our topic of letter O, saying ah most of the time. In the word love, letter O says vowel schwa. So it'd sound more like love. So O does say other sounds besides ah. Typically in stressed syllables, it will say ah like in not. But in words like love, some, sun, it says the sound, a stress schwa. Good question. And the challenge here comes back to our accent patterns, where for many people, the difference between the central sound and the more open sound, people have a tendency to use an when they should be using an in English, because your native language may not have the so you might not be as comfortable as that in that central, more lax position, and you have a tendency to open too much and do an sound. So I do have a video specifically about versus schwa, looking at words like not versus nut, etc., to help you correct that pattern. That video is in our Sounds of English course on speechmodification.com and also here on YouTube. After class, I'll put some timestamps in the description for this video and in the comments so that you can go to specific topics for the video, and also I'll put additional links, so I'll direct you to where you can find our Sounds of English course and also this particular video about versus ah. Thank you. Great question. Okay. We have a question about the word tighter. I'm pretty sure it's the same as this word tighter. So this one is a medical term for a shot, and this one is the comparative form of tight. But let's check, because I like to verify information. I also like to show you how you can look words up, because I think it's just a really useful tool. So I'm going to go ahead and show you on my website, speechmodification.com. You can get help for lots of different things. So we have on the website, you can see how to get to our courses, information about our training. But here on the top menu, if you go to the free practice area, and you click on Online Practice Free Trial, or you can also click on the blog. There's a search box. You can type in a word, a sound, your question, and related videos will come up, or related lessons, excuse me. So I'm just going to type in dictionary, and I'll show you we have a number of different lessons about using the dictionary. This one that just says using online dictionaries talks about dictionaries that I like, gives you some links and some information. So I'm going to show you, I like using the Oxford Learner's Dictionary because it has really good information. It shows you information in British English and American English. And you can listen to the words, you can look for the IPA symbols, etc. So, it's thinking I wanted title instead of titer. Autocorrect. Sorry about that. I have to overcome what the iPad wants me to think it wants. Okay, 1 second. Titre. Okay, so it's not finding it here, but I know it's a word. So let's look up. Just look it up on Google. Sorry for the delay. Okay. So that's because you can also spell it Titer. So let's go back to the dictionary. So it is the same. It is tighter. So yes, anyway, a little bit of a failed experiment because of the spelling. So just to show you, we also spell it like this, I guess. So it's an I diphthong. So you see that as tie. And then in English, we tend to, for both of these words, use a flap T here. So it'll sound the same as if we use two Ds. So kind of like tighter. If looking at this pronunciation or this spelling of the word helps you, just thinking about tighter. So the I diphthong and then like a light D, tighter. Okay, great question. Thank you. And we have a question about the word. Again, here's a word I don't know for sure. I would guess it would be norte. I'm not sure what language that comes from or how it's used. So let's see what we can find. If we look it up, maybe we'll have better luck this time on Oxford Learner's Dictionary. And if I cannot find it there, I'll come back to look. I'll do some research for you on that particular word. Nortje. Okay, yeah, I'm not finding that either. So there are times when the dictionary is not that helpful because if it's a proper noun or that's someone's name, possibly South African cricketer. You can give me a little bit more specifics on what you're looking for there. If it's someone's name, I can research that for you and get back to you. But I do, especially when it's a name or something I'm not familiar with, I do really like to do some thorough research so that I know I'm giving you an accurate answer rather than just guessing based on the spelling of something. Okay. Yes, we have comments about other dictionaries. So the Oxford Learner's Dictionary is one choice. Merriam-Webster is great. Using a learner's dictionary sometimes can be helpful because they tend to explain things in a way that assumes that you're learning the language or learning the words. But of course, just knowing how to read the symbols in the dictionary that you're using can be helpful. So look for the pronunciation guide, either in the book or in the online dictionary, so that you know when you see the written symbols what sounds they're talking about. Great. Okay. Yes. He's saying Norte is a name. So I'm going to guess Norte or Nortier, but I don't know. I'll have to look it up for you. when it comes to names, it's going to depend on the person, but again, I'll come back to you with some more research. Okay, and he's saying some people pronounce it as Nokia. Okay, interesting. Thank you. We have a question about the word as, and then ass, like donkey. So here, the difference is just that we have the z sound in this word and the s sound in this word. So if I'm saying, for example, as I, it's going to sound like as I. So linking it together, and there's our is our black cat vowel, as I. So making sure you have the z sound when you're saying the word as he said, as I said, versus the s in ass is going to be voiceless. So the donkey is also called the ass. You're going to just notice that there's a voiceless sound there. That's true for a lot of words that end with letter S are going to be the z sound, and you have a tendency maybe to devoice it. If I'm just saying, for example, the word has, I don't need to say has with a strong Z. I can say it has, and you can hear what makes that Z sound happen is that my vowel is a little bit longer, and then I'm very light on the Z. So if I said he has a, if you can hear the noise of this and I'm holding it, making a strong S sound, it's going to sound incorrect. If I'm making a very light S sound, that's what he has. You can hear there's a little bit of a S quality to it. I'm just not doing a strong sound there. So watch that you don't want has, but rather has. Very short on your Z sound at the end. Same for these words. Yeah, that's definitely something that can be challenging, the S and Z sounds. I do have a number of videos talking about that. First of all, knowing what letter S should say, and then second of all, being able to do that short, light Z at the end of words like has and is and as, etc. Okay, we have a question about TH plus S. For example, in the words with something. Yes, so I've talked about this a number of times because for many people, linking those TH sounds can be challenging. So after class, come back and check in the comments and I'll direct you to a video specifically about linking the TH. But when it comes to this particular combination with something, just know that for the TH sound, your tongue needs to be more forward, the air is flowing, and then you need to pull back to this position for the S sound. So technically I am linking them with something, so you can hear the just transitions into this with something. What I would suggest is if at first you need to make a little break with something and make two distinct placements for the th and s sounds, feeling where those are, eventually you should be able to just smoothly move back into the s from the th. But it's not easy, particularly if you have the accent error pattern where it's easier for you to say with than with. Just getting that placement for the TH is the most critical piece in this kind of phrase. Trying lots of similar phrases with someone. Some people will also pronounce with more as the th, with something. And if that's your pronunciation for with, first of all, if it's easier to do it voiceless with something, with or with, both are correct. If you prefer and it's easier to do the voiced with, like breathe, with the th sound, with something. What was I going to say about that? With something. That you can just start to devoice as you move out of that with. When we're doing something like breathes, the S letter is voiced, so it's a Z sound, breathes. And so there you just, again, same tongue position, you're just keeping your voice on as you transition. So trying a variety of different combinations of sounds and words, and it's not easy, so try to stick with it. Yeah, that was a great question. Thank you so much. Okay, well, thank you for the great questions today. It was nice to see so many of you here. Wonderful range of topics, and I really enjoyed hearing what's on your mind today. If you're watching this as a replay, feel free to leave questions in the comments. I'll get back to you with answers on those. I'll be back again tomorrow with our Word of the Day class, as well as our members-only class that we have on Sundays. And channel members, remember that you can leave your comments anytime throughout the week, and I'll cover your requests and questions on Sunday, whether or not you can make it to the live class. And also, we'll have our regular Word of the Day classes throughout the week, and next Saturday we'll have another live question and answer class like today. Feel free to leave your questions and comments throughout the week for requests for new videos for our Word of the Day. Do check out our online courses on speechmodification.com. Thanks so much for attending class, for liking, subscribing, sharing the videos. It really helps support speech modification. If you're interested in channel membership, click the join button to learn more about the perks we offer. Thanks everyone for a wonderful class, and looking forward to seeing you in our next one. I'm Christine Dunbar from speechmodification.com. Remember, if you want to sound like a native speaker, you can do it. speechmodification.com. Bye everyone. Have a wonderful Saturday.